Okay, so let's get started. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining this webinar today with Quuppa and ThinkInside. Today, we're going to be talking about ThinkIN for COVID-19 emergency, with primary focus on Industry 4.0, mainly being the manufacturing and logistics industries. My name is Jesse Parnanen, or Jesse. I am the marketing designer here at Quuppa. I'll be facilitating this discussion today and going through some overview in general. Just some housekeeping before we start. If you have any questions at all, please use the GoToWebinar application. There is a questions tab where you can ask questions throughout the webinar, and we will be holding a short Q&A at the end of this webinar. Joining me on the call is Jacopo Carreras, who is the CEO of ThinkInside, and he will be talking about the ThinkIN Solution. So yeah, let's get started. So for today's agenda, I'll be briefly going over Quuppa RTLS technology, and then I'll hand over to Jacopo, who will talk about the ThinkIN Solution and asset tracking and process optimization for Industry 4.0. We'll give a brief presentation of a case study from Dyer Engineering, and then we'll get into exactly what new challenges and risks there are for the manufacturing industry in relation to COVID-19, and as well as how the ThinkIN Solution can safely restart these production activities, get people back to work through the use of social distancing and monitoring and things like that. So I will, let's move forward. So an overview of Quuppa in general. We were founded in 2012 as a spin-off of Nokia Research Center, so we're about 7 or 8 years old. The location technology has been developed since 2005, so quite a considerable amount of time. We currently have 8 offices. Our head office is based in Finland, in southern Finland. We also have offices in the USA, Australia, India, United Arab Emirates, and we also have 3 in China. Overall, we have around 500 customers, or just over. We have over 170 business partners who range from tag vendors, system integrators, service providers. We've deployed over 2,000 systems in over 50 countries, so it's very established technology. I just wanted to go through some of our key achievements from last year. So last year we were recognized as visionary in Gartner's Magic Quadrant for Indoor Location Services, which was fantastic. We also launched our Generation Q product family and subscription model with some new products. One big thing that we always like to mention is that we won the Finnish Hockey League and the KHL League, which is the Continental Hockey League in Russia. And one of the main reasons that we like to bring this up is because generally ice hockey as a sport sets very extreme requirements for Quuppa in general as a system. The players need to be tracked 10 times a second. The puck needs to be tracked 100 times a second, as well as being a very robust, where the puck, for example, has to be able to withstand a hit to a goal post or a sidebar at over 150 kilometers an hour. So it has to be a very robust system. Meanwhile, tracking all of this in real time, so you can be watching the sport and seeing everything that's happening digitally on a smartphone or tablet or PC. So yeah, moving on, we've been working closely with Bluetooth for a very long time and have had a big part to play in the 5.1 specification, and just to ensure that it aligns with our direction finding methodologies here at Quuppa. And a little later from last year, we also have a global partnership with both Nordic Semiconductor and Silicon Labs, so really taking our technology down to that chip level. So that was a brief overview of Quuppa as a company in general. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we provide as a technology provider. So the Quuppa intelligent locating system works on standard Bluetooth low energy technology. Important to mention here that it's not based on sort of like an ultra wideband system where it's triangulation of nodes or it's not based on like signal strength as you would receive in RSSI. It's actually measuring the angles and the angular directions of the tags corresponding to the locators. Now the Bluetooth signal that's passed to the locators, all the data runs through our advanced positioning engine, which we call the Quuppa positioning engine. And we have a lot of advanced software tools which help our customers to really benefit from this technology and plan, deploy, simulate, and test different projects. So one thing I would like to say here is that if you wanted to find out a little bit more about the Quuppa positioning engine, the software in general, or any of the products that we have, please do visit quuppa.com and you can find all the information there. The 4 key pillars, which are the benefits of using our Quuppa system, are the accuracy, the versatility, the scalability, and the openness. So in terms of accuracy, in most of our use cases and most of our different industry verticals, we can achieve sub-meter accuracy. And it's actually a very common misconception that Bluetooth can't really get down to that sub-meter level of accuracy, but I guess we're here to prove that wrong. The versatility, this is a great time to talk about the interoperability of other Bluetooth devices. So not just the Quuppa tags that we have and not just our partner tags, but ultimately Quuppa acts as sort of an IoT gateway to provide different types of information and sensor data. So that will be smart wearables or watches, heart rate sensors, temperature monitors, accelerometers, a variety of interoperable devices. Talking about scalability a little bit, the great thing about Quuppa is that our technology can be used in a variety of smaller or larger scale projects, and it's hugely dependent on what really you wanted to use it for. So what we like to talk about at Quuppa is the 3 P's of location, which is presence, proximity, and positioning. So for example, if you have a warehouse and you just want to know if an asset is within the building, you need sort of less locator density, and you can just measure whether that tracked asset, whether it's a vehicle or a person or a tool, it's actually within that facility. Then moving on to the proximity. The proximity will give you a rough idea of where that asset that has been tagged is within that facility. And then that goes all the way down to positioning as well. So this gives us sub-meter accuracy for finding anywhere where there is an asset which needs to be located at very high level of accuracy. Finally, we have the openness. Our platform is very open, and we actually rely heavily on our partner ecosystem of system integrators, application developers to build their solution on top of our technology offering, and using our open API, take that raw data and that dot on the map and pull out key metrics that is suitable or that are suitable for their use case. Also, we have a variety of tag partners who use our Qt1 module in their tags to build strong, robust, compatible tags with the Quuppa system, as well as taking full advantage of our Quuppa firmware libraries or tag firmware libraries for use with their existing tags. So that was just a brief overview of Quuppa technology in general. What I'd like to do is I would like to bring Jacopo in, who will give us a little bit more of an understanding about what ThinkInside is doing with Quuppa Tech. Jacopo, are you there?
Yeah, thank you, Jesse, for the introduction, and good afternoon to everyone, and thanks for joining this webinar. So what I'm going to present today is, well, of course, the main topic is about COVID-19 and how manufacturing companies are dealing with this emergency, and what are the key services that can be enabled to get manufacturing companies back to work. But before jumping into that, I would like also to present a little bit more in detail also what we're doing in terms of asset tracking and what is actually motivating RTLS and location in this industry, in this sector. Maybe some of you are already familiar with this technology, but for those who are not, I would like to just introduce you a little bit of the storytelling around this, and specifically present you one of our latest cases, which is Dyer Engineering. Now, when it comes to manufacturing industries, most of us are very familiar typically with the automotive sector, where you see all these production lines extremely robotized and automatized, where everything happens without too much human intervention. But actually, the reality is that if we look into manufacturing, and specifically discrete manufacturing, this is often not the case. And to make this a little bit more clear, I have collected these two pictures, which are coming from two of our customers' cases. Both of them are very big companies producing for very large industries worldwide. And this is kind of a picture of their shop floor. The shop floor is characterized, in one case, from more than 2,000 pallets moving over something like 10,000 square meters, 24/7, 365 days. And as you can see from this picture, there are some very dense deposits where these pallets are being parked and are being moved by people, by workers. Now, as you can imagine, if you have to find a pallet here, either you are extremely organized in putting the right pallet in the right spot all the time, or you might end up being in big trouble oftentimes. This is exactly the case. This is exactly why we started to work with customers. Finding the right pallet could, in some very worst case, take up to 45 minutes. If we look on the picture on the right, very similar scenario. Their production process is running over thousands of trolleys, moving these metal components, which are the product of this company, again, 24/7, 365 days a year. So in all these scenarios, there's not much you can do if you want to digitalize this process than using location. So knowing where all these pallets or these trolleys are in real time with very high precision is the key to implement, a sort of digital transformation of the process. And as a consequence, is also, the key to make this process better, more smooth, and more efficient. And this is actually how everything started. And this is also why location is so relevant in these specific industries. So what we're doing? So we are in a way creating a digital twin of these manufacturing processes by using localization technologies. Because localization technology means that each one of those items that you see on those shop floor becomes digitalized, meaning that we know where it is located, we know what kind of product is associated to each one of those elements. And because of this, everything becomes much more easier in terms of management, easier in terms of understanding where the bottlenecks are, easier in terms of understanding how to improve the overall process efficiency over time. And this is actually exactly what the ThinkIN is about. ThinkIN, starting from tracking of those assets actually can be anything that is relevant to be tracked inside a manufacturing site. So it could be a forklift, it could be tools, it could be pallets, trolleys, goods, semi-finished goods, anything that from a business perspective is worth to be tracked. So we track those items. We track potentially, and this is also one of the topics that will be discussed later on, people, because of safety as an example. We collect all this information in real time, mapping this information to the specific production process that we're targeting, and then integrating also eventually with the ERP systems of the end customer. And then with our technology, our algorithms, and our software, we transform this into intelligence on the one hand about the specific manufacturing process, and eventually also in real-time services to be consumed on the shop floor. So by the workers, by the many different people involved in the production process. And so this is actually bringing us, to what is called the digital twin. So digital twin is in a way a digital representation of the production process. And the starting point, of course, is the single asset that we are digitalizing. So the single asset means that we're able to know where it is, where it has been. We're able to also implement specific business rules that can allow us to insert alarms into the system related to production quality, related to deviation from the standard procedures, everything that actually is related to the single asset being tracked. But more in general, what they're doing is that we are digitalizing the overall industrial workflow behind a given production process. And so we're able not only to get a snapshot of the industrial site, but also analyze it over time, understanding and measuring very precisely what is happening, where assets are being over time, where are located, and where they're wasting time. And because of this, a number of tools can also be used, of course, to analyze these workflows, understanding deviation, understanding performance, and in the long run, optimize it. This is actually what ThinkIN is about. But let me now jump into a specific concrete case, which is Dyer Engineering. Dyer Engineering is a manufacturing company located in County Durham in UK. It's a pretty old company. The company was founded in 1977 and is specialized in manufacturing complex metal components and structures. So they're building something like what is represented in this picture, very complicated metal structures, as well as also they also have a batch production line. So they're producing both complex metal structures as well as small components for many different industries, actually. So they are serving the rail, automotive, defense, oil and gas. All these are industries that are being served by Dyer Engineering. And what they do is actually they both design, prototype, and eventually have batch production for all these kind of components. Now, why they actually reached out to us? Dyer Engineering is a very interesting case because they are a pretty advanced company. Advanced meaning in terms of ICT, IT, in terms also digital transformation. So they have already embraced like many different Microsoft tools since a long time. They have a very complex ERP system that they actually use to manage the process and their production. But at the same time, their production is characterized by a pretty complicated process running over more than 10 buildings with many different phases, with a lot of workers, moving parts and components all the time from one building to another, from one site to another. And the total, shop floor space is approximately 100,000 square feet. So it's very large and it's distributed over 2 sites. And so the main problem is that, they have a very good way of scheduling the work, scheduling the process. But at the same time, once the production process starts, everything is in the hands of workers and the procedures that they have in place and all the rest. So for them, it was really key to find the right technology to digitalize actually the process that is running on the shop floor, finding ways to get a snapshot in real time on what is happening, where all the open jobs are located and where the assemblies are located, where the tools are located, so that they can improve efficiency on the shop floor on the one hand, and also precisely understand where time can be saved, which eventually translates into a better scheduling of the work and a lead time to be reduced. So these were the main objectives based on which actually they reached out to us together with Digital Catapult. Actually, this is also this was a project sponsored and supported also by the UK Innovation Agency. And that's how everything started. From this, actually, we had a site survey. We eventually came up with the deployment plan that in this case consisted of something like 60 locators deployed over the 10 buildings in the 2 sites. And in total, we actually use 1,000 tags to cover over time all the assets and jobs that are flowing on the shop floor. Of course, the tags are being reused, from one production to another. So these tags are constantly moving, over time from one production to the following one, but covering at any point in time all the jobs running on the shop floor. After a couple of months of running the project, we already started to measure the first results. The first results were mainly targeting only the time saved in searching assets and the time saved in searching tools, and integrated this also with some steps in their production process. And after only a few months of a pilot project, which is now in production, what Dyer Engineering estimated to be the gain, the benefits, and so in a way also the return on their investment is approximately £10,000 a month. And the important thing is this is just a start. This is just the beginning. This is actually just what we achieved by digitalizing the location of the many different assets moving on the shop floor. And now we're going into a deeper stage where we start to model the complete workflow, industrial workflow of Dyer Engineering, and we start to analyze where bottlenecks are and where additional savings and, in a way, gains can actually be achieved with this technology and with this infrastructure that they have deployed. Now, having said this, so it's pretty natural to understand that if you are able to track assets with very high precision, of course, what we have been doing so far could also be adapted to, the current situation. The current situation in the industrial sector, I think we are all aware that it's pretty worrying in a way, and it's pretty also having a major impact for many different reasons. But the main one is that now that phase 2 is starting, a lot of the companies working in manufacturing have very severe challenges to face. Those challenges are typically related to ways to contain the COVID-19, so the epidemic, which in a way is related to social distancing in first. Social distancing means that those companies to operate are expected to be able to track where the workers are located over time, track contacts, and make sure that the social distancing is in a way respected while operating. And this is something that, of course, is very, very important for them, because if these rules are not respected, on the one hand, they might be asked to close the site, the production plant, but on the other, this might have a major impact also, and probably this is the even more important thing, on the health care of the workers on the site, and on the working environment, which is no longer safe in the way it should. And so these are the challenges that the industrial sector and the manufacturing sectors are facing right now. And the impact is pretty obvious. This is just one of the many different pictures that we see on how COVID-19 is affecting the market in the short and middle term. And below, I just reported some of the very bad cases that were reported recently in the news. We're talking about industrial sites where hundreds of employees were found positive to COVID-19, which eventually ended up in the plant being shut down for a long time. And this is something that is pretty much global. So some of these newspaper headlines were from North America, some from Europe, some from Japan. The impact, as we all know, I don't think there's anything to explain here, is and will be pretty huge. But so social distancing is emerging as a key requirement for manufacturing companies, for industries to operate. But which are the key challenges of enforcing and monitoring social distancing in manufacturing? So the first challenge is that oftentimes these environments are pretty dense, which means that workers are expected to kind of operate pretty close one to another. And needless to say that in this case, smart working is not an option, at least for the people and the workers working on site, on the shop floor, which means that if you want to ensure social distancing, first of all, you need to have a way to detect where workers are located over time with high accuracy. And this is exactly what Quuppa actually is providing with their technology. And this is especially important because as always, when there is like sort of need and opportunity, on the other hand, there's many new solutions coming up. So one of the many different solutions that we are observing being present in the market is based on the simple detection of proximity by means of radio frequency signals without the need of infrastructure. Now, this, while being extremely efficient from a budget point of view, as it doesn't require any kind of infrastructure, on the other hand, is not so efficient in terms of reliability, meaning that this kind of system can easily work if you have to detect one person far away, like something like 4 to 5 meters from one to another. But if you want to detect whether one worker is 1 meter or 2 meters apart, then this kind of technology doesn't work, or at least they do not work as reliable in the way they should. So accuracy is a key requirement if you want to ensure social distancing. The second key challenge for manufacturing companies is that they typically work on existing procedures. Procedures regulate in a way what workers should do, in which areas of the site, and when. And some of these procedures, of course, might not be complying in the very best with social distancing and might need to be revised in order to comply with these new regulations. And finally, if you want to track workers because you want to know where they are and where, if they're respecting social distancing, then you have also to consider, what kind of wearable device they might need, and what could be the way also to notify workers whether social distancing is not respected. Again, this might be a challenge, and again, so also in this case, Quuppa actually it's a great opportunity because, of course, there's a large ecosystem of tag manufacturers, and we could actually choose from many different options. Some options providing ways to badge the tag, the wearable device. Some other options providing vibration. So many different ways to feedback some specific messages to the worker on site. So starting from these challenges, actually, we started to develop our own solution for social distancing. And the solution, as I said, is kind of addressing one by one all those requirements. First of all, it's based on high precision localization infrastructure, which means that we can monitor and enforce social distancing with very high precision. And this means that we don't interfere too much, or at least we try to interfere at minimum with existing working procedure on site. So even 2 meters could still be okay for ensuring social distance. And this is the kind of granularity that we're able to work with. The second thing is, of course, we want to first notify workers and eventually notify the employers or the company if these kind of situations are not respected for a too long time. And so there's a way to feedback directly over the wearable device of the person, as well as to send notifications to some other person in charge of enforcing social distancing in the manufacturing site. So different ways to communicate, to be notified, and to interact when something happens and something is to be handled properly. And finally, of course, this is a system that is not just about the shop floor, but it's also about the many different shared spaces that usually are part of any kind of production environment. So there's a canteen, a coffee room, changing rooms. When workers are localized, then of course all these kind of shared spaces can also be monitored, which means that we can also control the access to these spaces and make sure that the density of people is good enough to ensure social distancing. So a very rich set of services to provide some kind of support in real time for monitoring and enforcing social distancing, and for providing ways to communicate back to the many different people involved. Of course, it's not just about real time, it's also about, on the one hand, tracing contacts. Tracing contacts means that we want to know when some positive, we want to trace the contacts, so that if a positive case is reported, we're able to backtrace all the chain of contacts, which means in a way that we're able to isolate a possible outbreak in that given site. So it's about contact tracing, it's about backtracing, and it's about also getting some sort of index, we call it risk exposure index, of that given industrial site, which reflects how good the given company is in ensuring social distance, enforcing social distance. And this is good for many different reasons, but one in particular is that you can clearly identify those areas where it's very hard to enforce social distancing. And for those areas, you might consider to revise or to review your current production process in order to be and to facilitate social distancing to be respected. So monitoring on the one hand, report and contact tracing on the other. These are the key services that we are delivering as a company. And so benefits are pretty obvious. You can guarantee a safe working environment for all the workers, for the production plant in general. What is very important is that while ensuring social distancing, on the one hand, you're also ensuring the full plant capacity, because social distancing in a very easy way could be enforced by reducing the capacity of the site. So instead of having 100 workers, you have half of them. you reduce the capacity and you ensure social distancing. But this, with this kind of technology, you can actually achieve both, have full plant capacity and ensure social distancing. You can operate even in lockdown periods, and you can confine possible outbreaks by backtracing all the contacts whenever a positive case is reported. And last but not least, this is actually what you could use in the short term, but in general, it's an asset tracking solution that could potentially be used for many other reasons. One last slide on privacy, which is of course one of the elements to be considered. This is something that in the design of our service we have considered from the very beginning. So it's clearly defined who can access data and when, under which conditions, potentially making these conditions also public to anyone involved and uses in the system, whether it's the employer or the workers. Everyone will have access to this data in a very clear and transparent way. And of course, it's not just about technology, it's also about communication. It's also about communicating how you're going to use the system, for which purpose, and how it will be used. So privacy, of course, is a very key requirement to be addressed before, during, and after the deployment on one of these systems. Okay, yeah, so this is all I had to say today. So I hand it over back to you, Jesse, for any possible Q&A.
Thank you very much. Yes, so we're going to move over onto a little bit of Q&A now. Just before we do, we've got a few questions on the line. We've got a few minutes as well. But if you would like to reach out to the industrial sector with Quuppa, you want to find out anything more about partnering or anything else about our technology at all, send us an email at marketing@quuppa.com. Or if you want to find out more information about our products or software or any of our services, then please visit Quuppa.com. If you're looking to partner or you want to find out a little bit more information about what Jacopo was covering today in terms of the contact tracing and social distancing and how we can use RTLS to help combat this COVID-19, then please get in touch directly with Jacopo at Jacopo Carreras at ThinkIn.io, or if you just want some more information about the company in general, then visit ThinkIn.io. We do have a few questions on the line, but if anybody actually has any other questions, then feel free to put them into the GoToWebinar platform. But Jacopo, if you're ready, I'll go through some of these.
Yes, please.
So,
yeah.
The first one, it says, can your technology integrate with third-party systems such as ERPs?
Yeah, so this is a good question also, because this is actually not just a possibility, but oftentimes is a requirement, meaning that, if you want to deeply, map a given production process, localization is part of the picture, but then you need to get additional information from an existing ERP system. So we're already supporting different ERP system from SAP or many others. What our system does is, depending on the touch point between our digital twin creation and a given manufacturing process, so we dynamically collect data from existing ERP systems as well as push data to existing ERP systems. And this is the way that what we do gets integrated into the mainstream technologies that are being used by any of our customers. So yeah, this is possible. It's already supported, and we're typically doing it in any of the projects that we have been involved in.
Okay, fantastic. We're getting some more questions coming through now. One regarding to actually we've got two regarding the Dyer Engineering case. I think you might be able to take them both in one. The first one is on the case of Dyer. What was the main point where the monthly savings come from? And the second part of that would be, how many square meters did you cover in that Dyer case with 60 locators?
Okay, so the savings, actually, this is something that, the Dyer Engineering, they did their own math calculations. From what, they share with us, the way they actually reached to this conclusion was from, on the one hand, the number of utilizations of our system for searching assets, and then trying to quantify, what was the reason for using our system. So as an example, if I was looking for a given product piece or part or component, they actually estimated how long it would have took to find that component without the support of our system. So in this case, the very first calculation they did was the time saved searching for assets, and also the parts wasted. Oftentimes what happens is that if you don't find a given part or component, what you might end up in doing is just you to produce another one of those, especially if you are running under pressure for completing a given production order. If you don't find a part, you might end up in producing an additional one. So combining these two elements, they come up with this kind of calculation, which is quantified in approximately 10,000 pounds per month. Yeah.
Okay. And then I think
the second question related to the area covered, if I'm not wrong, it was in the order of 10,000 square feet. Sorry, 100,000 square feet.
I think it was 100. It was in the slide. I think it was 100,000 square feet that was covered.
Yeah.
But yeah, related to that, a little bit more about the relating to Quuppa as well, and that scalability. Even though it's only 60 locators, depending on that level of location that you're looking for, you can have different of locators in different areas where you want a higher latency or higher accuracy rate versus, let's say, for example, the entrance to a facility or something like that. So with a few locators, you can cover quite a considerable amount of area.
Yeah, and if we can add also something to this, one specific building of the site was characterized by very, very high ceilings. And when I say high ceilings, I mean in the order of 15 meters. And one of the things of Quuppa is that high ceilings actually are very good, because with the one single locator, well, you need the outdoor locator, which has a higher sensitivity, but with one single locator you can cover a very large area. And so, as an example, one of the buildings had these 15 meters high ceilings, which means that with just a few locators we were able to cover a very large area.
Okay. Great. One of the other questions that we have here, it says that this means that I think this is relating to tracking employees within the work area. It says that, does this mean that every worker has to wear a tag?
Yeah, I mean, of course, when it's about tracking, what is not tracked is, of course, invisible to us. So if you want to track workers, the pre-requirement is that they need to wear a tag. That's the case.
Yeah, and I think related to that is it's almost the same as you would have, for example, a key fob if you went into an office or something like that. If you have a single tag that has multiple almost use cases for that tag, for example, access control, and then you would get that traceability as well through that information from that tag.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Let's see what else we've got here. We had a question on contact tracing, but I think we covered that because that question came in just before you covered contact tracing. So the question was, would your system be able to do contact tracing? So I'll go with a yes on that one.
Yeah, correct.
Another question here, is the solution an off-the-shelf solution, or the functions such as warning signals, do they have to be developed, or how would it work?
Yeah, so everything that I described is an off-the-shelf solution, meaning that the warnings can be configured, as well as it can be configured what a contact is. Usually a contact is characterized by a given proximity for a sufficiently long time. So this is, of course, something that you can configure in the system, as well as the warnings, whether they're coming to the device where by the worker, or whether they're coming through some web interface. Everything is pretty much off the shelf and available, as a product. It doesn't mean that maybe some customization is needed, but everything I've described in this slide is pretty much off the shelf. Yeah.
Perfect. Let's have a look what else we have here. How difficult is it to map a customer's production process?
Yeah, so this is something that is typically part of the initial survey. So mapping the production process of customer means, as you can understand, we're pretty much looking from a geospatial point of view on the one hand, and from the assets to be tracked on the other. So usually this is mapped through initial survey of the site on the one hand, and through some discussions with the key people involved in the production process. And from this, actually, what happens is that we map the process into the way in our system, in our ThinkIN platform, we map the digital twin. And then we start incrementally to model it inside our environment and our technology. This is a process that starts with the survey, then gets implemented into the modeling section and part of our system and our platform, and eventually gets improved over time while learning more and more things. There is an easy start that over time gets refined and gets improved. But usually it's pretty fast. It really depends on whether the end customer already has some maybe predefined documentation that we can use to get a better sense and understanding of the production process, and then from the initial site survey that we do before starting any project. Sorry.
Okay, great. Right, we've got another one here. This is it's more related to a specific deployment. It says, what is the deployment time of an average project? For example, 10,000 square meters, if you wanted to do worker tracking. Do we have a rough estimate?
Yeah, so there's no golden rule here, but usually what takes the most is the cabling. So any single Quuppa locator is connected through an Ethernet cable. There may be different IT architectures, and there may be different ways to connecting all these antennas, but what takes the most is the cabling part. Once the cabling part is done, what happens is that we come and install the locators and we fine-tune the system. And as an example, for 60 locators, it took, I think, 1.5 days of 2 people on site. But again, once the cabling work was completed. So that's usually what takes the most, and the cabling work really depends on how fast and the specific end customer is in running cables, and also how busy it is maybe with other activities. But depending on that, actually depends the time needed to set up the overall infrastructure.
Okay, yeah, fantastic. Running a little bit out of time, but we've got we can probably get through a couple more questions. I've got one about privacy here. It says, I mean, obviously you covered the privacy in the last slide there, but this question says, what privacy issues does the solution present, if any? As I understand, the only data being collected or tracked is employees' physical location within the facility.
Yeah, so here there are different ways to handle privacy. The easiest one is, of course, to only collect location and notify the workers. So there's no personal data collected whatsoever. The only feedback loop for enforcing social distancing is like a vibration on the device of the worker or something like that. Of course, this has the advantage of preserving fully the privacy. On the other hand, by doing this, there's no way to backtrace contact, which means that if like a positive case is reported, there's no way to kind of confine the people maybe involved in this outbreak. Which means that eventually you might end up in shutting down the entire site, the entire production plant. An incremental step to this is that you collect the data, you associate the data to some anonymous identifier of the worker, as an example, but you don't disclose this information unless a certified case is reported, and only in this case the information is being disclosed to interested parties, which could be even the healthcare. Responsible for managing the COVID case, the positive COVID case, and so on. So in this case, privacy is not fully preserved to the extent to which the information is disclosed when there is a positive case. So yeah, so it's a tricky thing, privacy, because in this case there are many different aspects involved. Healthcare and the safe on the workplace being one of them. And the best way we have identified to handle privacy is to provide this kind of incremental level of privacy preservation. It can be fully preserving, it could be partially preserving, it could be completely non-preserving the privacy, meaning that you can really know where everyone is located and so on. It's really up to the end user to decide what is acceptable for that given company, for the workers of the company, and what is really the best option. And we provide many different ways of handling it.
Yeah, of course, and obviously with this COVID-19 pandemic and having contact tracing and history of people's locations, it's obviously very important for us to be able to trace that back. So for me personally, I think that the issues concerning privacy are probably drastically going to change over the next few weeks and months, depending on how the governments figure out how to enforce these kind of lockdown measures and quarantine and isolation. So it's still a very hot topic, but I think there's a lot more regulatory information that will probably come out over the next few weeks and months. So I think we'll definitely find out soon. All right, I think we've pretty much hit the time there. There are a few other questions. One thing I would just like to say is that we'll make the slides and the recording available. Most likely we'll send out an email tomorrow with some links and things so everyone can review this. And what we'll also do is, unfortunately, because we're running out of time, we'll go through the questions that have been asked. We have a record of them, and we will answer you directly on those questions. And if not, then if we keep getting some more questions, then we'll see if we can host another webinar. But I would just like to thank everybody for attending today. It's been we've had a very high attendance rate and high engagement rate. So again, people are still very interested in the logistics manufacturing industry and how it's affected by COVID and how we can really benefit from this RTLS technology. So yeah, I'd like to thank everyone for attending, and thanks, Jacopo.
Thanks, thank you all. It was a pleasure. And you have my contact details for any additional information. Feel free to drop a line or give me a call.
Perfect. All right, guys, we'll see you on the next webinar.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.